I'm going to have my kids introduce themselves.
I'm Ravi Tripathi. Can you guys hear me? Sunil was my younger brother. And
My name is Sangeeta. I graduated Radnor a long time ago.
yeah, it feels like that. But so we're going to talk for hopefully like 15-ish minutes. Just first kind of share our story of Sunil, and then go over some reflections we've had, 10 months out from losing Sunil.
I'll start a little timeline. Sunil was born in 1990. He and Sangeeta and Ravi all went through Radnor from kindergarten up. Sunil really flourished in high school. He followed two very high-achieving siblings. I think that's a burden, but he handled it well. In high school, he excelled in music, which neither of the other kids did, so that was sort of nice. Saxophonist. Middle school actually started him with music. It became very important to him. He participated in crew for 3 years in high school. That doesn't seem like Sunil, but he really liked the fitness part of it. And he went to Brown. All three kids went to Brown. It wasn't planned, but it happened. He was actually graduated from the high school in 2008 and did very well at Brown for the first couple of years, overlapped with Ravi for 1 year, and then was on his own. Played saxophone at Brown. I'm not very good at this. He was a philosophy major, very abstract thinker, very intellectual. I could never argue with him. He always won. And then his junior year, we started to see signs of depression. It's hard when you're 300 miles away. But he got less interested in classes. I don't think I picked it up right away, sort of mid-year, and he wasn't doing the readings for his classes. And when we visited, we saw that he wasn't doing his laundry and those kind of things.
And we started noticing his eating habits got poor, and his sleeping habits got poor. And these were kind of the first signs, that we could see. He was usually a very scheduled person. He took a lot of pride, actually, in being very regular in a lot of his habits. And so all of these things, they were very gradual as they started. And I definitely know, he was in college. Life habits change, and there were questions of, is he just growing? How much weight do we put into any of these things? But over time, we definitely, they started to get very noticeable, and started getting in the way of his life, of his functioning. And so as my mom said, at the end of his junior year, school was becoming very difficult for him, mostly because he just wasn't interested in classes. And he became a philosophy major because early on in college he took a logic class and just loved it and decided to make everything a logic argument with us at all times. And then later on, when we were talking about what philosophy classes he might look to take the next semester, what music classes he might look to take the next semester, nothing really stood out to him, and nothing caught his attention, and it became a real struggle. So we definitely encouraged him to take a pause from school, and see if we could figure out a way to get him some help. So, I mean, at this point, we were pretty well aware that, Sunil was struggling with depression, and we were gonna take it upon ourselves to try to help him as much as we could. And we're a pretty close family, for those of you that know us probably understand. So we were in constant contact with him, both us, the immediate family, and our extended family, family in Boston, family in New Jersey, all kind of definitely kept an eye out for him and tried to reach out and be check in with him and be involved in his life. And we struggled. We encouraged him to go talk to a therapist, go the route of talk therapy, or go the route of going to see a doctor and a psychiatrist eventually and maybe get on meds, or we even raised the possibility of inpatient programs as his depression progressed. The one thing, Sunil was a very independent person, and his response always was that he wanted to figure this out himself. He felt, he kind of presented it to us as this was his challenge in life, and he was up for it, and this was his, thing to tackle, and it made it difficult for us to figure out how to support him, how to be of any assistance to him. And after living in Providence and having us visit as frequently as we could manage, this past March, Sunil went missing, and we found his body 37 days later in April. He had committed suicide. And that was kind of, the end of our ability to help him while he was here, but that's definitely not the end of the story. So one of the first things we look back on, I think I've asked myself this question a million times, is what would I have done differently? My immediate reaction is always to list about 100 things that I wish I did differently. But I think in my better moments, the answer is always, it's an endless spiral of things that you can do differently that, in hindsight, should have done differently. And the one thing, I keep coming back to is, I wish I gave him one more hug and told him I loved him one more time than I did. And I try to leave it at that.
So as Ravi said, we spent a lot of time looking for Sunil because we didn't know that he had taken his life. And through the process of the search, we had to talk to a lot of people. And, my mom, who's incredibly introverted with strangers and extroverted with friends, we had to, we sent her out canvassing in Latino neighborhoods and walking down blocks and walking into small businesses and having, to tell her story 100 times a day. And we all had to tell our story 100 times a day, literally, to hang up every single poster and to talk to every single cop and every single librarian. And through the process of telling our story and being that vulnerable, we stumbled into just an ocean of other people who are struggling with people that they love, particularly young people in this age band, particularly boys. And for me, through the 37 days, there were 3 other bodies of young men that were found in Providence and Boston area. I was talking to the cops every day, and I was like, what is going on in the earth right now in this little vortex of Providence? And they were like, this is what is real. And one thing that didn't come up, Rev, when you spoke is we relatively early on knew that we are not clinicians and we needed more help. And we actually enlisted the support of a psychiatrist without Sunil, just among our family, to brainstorm interventions and strategies. to try to help. And one thing that never quite came out through all of those interactions was how much of a risk every young person is, that suicide is a real thing, that even if nobody ever makes a comment about it, any kind of expression, people are at risk. And I think that through the experience of searching, we all came to feel the depth of this problem in our society, of our kids and our brothers and our sisters and our parents. And I know that we're clearly speaking to people who understand this, but one of the things that we really started doing through our search was realizing that it's not just about finding Sunil, it's actually about changing the way we treat each other, and really trying to encourage each other to reach out just a little bit further to the person who's difficult, or to the person who doesn't want help, or to the person who thinks they have it figured out, because everybody is way more fragile than we like to show in our best selves. And the number of young people and adults that we interacted with that are facing just these same challenges was quite immense. So I think just one very specific reflection and kind of action that we took with us, and part of the reason why we were so relentless in the media and so relentless everywhere, is because we felt like this is so much bigger than Sunil. And how long we were searching for Sunil and how far we had to go to look allowed us to see how big this is. And how much the really, really small acts of kindness, of like stopping somebody on the street who's a stranger who you don't know and asking them if they're okay, or like calling back up that person that's on your iPhone that like you haven't called in a really long time and you're kind of pissed with because that you feel like they didn't call you back last. It's all of those little things that really, 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 really make a difference. And so just I wanted to share that reflection because it really was very apparent through our journey.
Sangeeta came off a train a few minutes before this meeting, so we didn't plan with her, but I'm so glad she's talking. I think the last thing I want to say is that when I think about all the interest and support in a group like this, is how can we do this better? I'm going to rely on the experts up here, but one thing Sang said I totally agree with. We asked Sunil along the way whether he had ever thought of hurting himself or whether he, ever considered it. And he totally blew it off. So when we got back to Pennsylvania, I happened to hear a program on NPR about the rising rate of suicide. It was one of the first days I listened to the radio. And by the end of that hour, I really felt that every depressed young person is a suicide risk, and we have to take it that seriously. They said 30% of all suicides never say anything about it. 30%. We really struggled with how to help him. He did not want to go for help. I don't think we could have done anything differently. But if the awareness in school, on campuses, in the health system is higher, if they screen for, depression, mental health earlier, if young people who are struggling, or even older people, don't have to feel embarrassed or ashamed, that's what we have to work towards. Sunil had a very hard time coming back to Radnor because he was a different person and he couldn't come back. And I just think that, the whole stigma, I know that's a word that's always used, but it's so true. And the resources of which we have learned, there are so many, like the Delco Suicide Task Force and Jenny's group, and there are so many that we're investigating now. They need to be, the kids, the students need to be aware of them and interacting with them. Anyway, I'm not very good at this.
Yeah, so just as a last word, we were very grateful to be able to share our story here, and we hope, we're grateful twofold. We hope that if anyone here happens to be struggling themselves or knows someone that's struggling, encourage them to get help from the resources we'll hear about. And for those of you, we said this already, but just to restate, for those of you that know someone who you think is struggling, just be extra kind to them and extra aware. And thank you all for being here. And we will stick around for questions at the end after the panelists present. So thank you.
One thing I didn't touch on, there's a index card that you're seeing for purpose. If you hear anything during the presentation where you want to jot down a question, or if your question and answer at the session at the end, that's not going to be taped. I'll collect the questions. You can direct me directly to the panelists, or can answer them most appropriately. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lincoln. She's our first presenter. Thank you.
I have to follow that very moving story, which is going to be very hard. And I think I'd like to introduce myself. I'm an adolescent medicine physician. I've been in the field for over 30 years, 20 of which have been over down the street at medicine at Radnor. In my 20 years as an adolescent medicine doctor, I have counseled countless students. I have several patients who have taken their lives, and I have a family member who took his life. And I think that to go along with what you said, and just how all of our lives are touched by suicide. And it's something we all have to talk about. Okay, I need my first slide. Can you hear me on this? Okay, all right. My task was to answer 3 questions for tonight, and that was the risk factors, the triggers, and any warning signs. To give just a little bit of background, in teens then, it's the 3rd leading cause of death. It accounts for 4,600 deaths per year, which accounts to about 12 per year, 12 per day, excuse me. Of that, 80% are males, 20% are females. But to note that females make much more attempts. Anywhere report is 2 to 4 times more attempts than males, but males tend to complete more. And again, to that 10 to 20% of all adolescents at some point have thought about suicide. And I have a feeling that number probably is probably underrepresented. It's probably much higher than that. On this list, I have listed about 7 things. The top 3 are the ones we have to pay most attention to. The first one is previous suicide attempt. If a child or a teen has attempted once, the odds of attempting a second time is 30 to 50%. And so if we all think about that now, that if we're going to raise our radar, that's number 1. Again, it's estimated that 80% of all young adults who have taken their lives have some underlying depression, anxiety, substance use, trauma, and abuse. That list has grown over the years because we're recognizing now that through the stress of daily life, through bullying, through self-imposed stress as well, perfectionism, that most is estimated about 80% have some underlying mental health. And number 3 then is family history, which is also very important to note, that any family history of emotional illness, suicide attempts, and substance use. And I think we can capture those top 3 because they are the 3 most important factors. The last 4 are important to also note because we put on stressful life event. And I tried to look up data about triggers, and there really is no trigger, but we'll always say there is something that sort of, triggered that, so broke the camel's back, to speak the colloquial language. There was something that says, that's it, I can't take it anymore. We've all helped that time at some point in our lives. And I think all of you as parents, and I have a 28-year-old and a 25-year-old, have all had children at some point who've had a stressful life event, being broken up for, not getting into their college, like, oh God, that's it. How are they ever going to survive this? And if I could send one word out tonight, it's called resilience. And we can talk about it at some point later on today, but people have to struggle. We have to learn how to struggle. We have to learn how to survive. We have to learn how to know how to deal with stressful life events, because they are going to happen. Snow happens. That's a stressful life event. Access to firearms, again, it's always surprising to me how I sometimes don't even ask this question, but how important it is, because access to firearms is a real threat. Many families have access to hunting guns, and so they're less of a risk. They tend to be locked, not loaded, and locked away and not accessed, but many of them do not. We talk about exposure to other suicides, and so the phrase of copycat suicides always comes up, and it is a risk factor. There were 2 recent suicides at Penn this month in January, and it's always, people will hear that, and especially if there's a celebrity suicide, it often triggers kids to say, well, if Kurt Cobain can do that, then so can I, and so we often worry about that. And another risk factor that's coming out is lesbian, transgender youth. That, again, kids who are outsiders, kids who are not in the mainstream, also probably at greater risk. If you look at that list, I'm just going to get one more thing about, is that there's no profile. All right. I think if you see about Sunil and the students at Penn, they're almost surprising to see how could these students here who are so well liked and so promising, how could they possibly have that much depression that they would attempt and hurt themselves? Okay. So as a physician, it's imperative, and I think that in all the teaching I do with all students, with all residents, is saying that there's always a hidden agenda in every doctor visit, all right? That they come in there, whether it be a sore throat, a headache, the top 4 things are there. It's fatigue, headaches, abdominal pain, and trouble sleeping. There's always a hidden message, and so I think part of you know that all teenagers get seen alone. That's really important to say, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. What else is going on? I've learned over the years now, I used to be embarrassed to say, could stress be playing a part? And I've learned now that when I say, is stress be playing a part, kids are welcome that. They say, thank God someone's asking me now that their stress could be part of the problem, and they can't wait to talk about it. Things they say. So I'm going to point out the top 2 just to distinguish things that I want to kill myself, and then I'd be better off dead. So those of us will know that they're very different. So wanting to kill themselves is an active phrase. I'm actually going to kill myself, and I would be better off dead is a more passive phrase. All right. I think it's important as you learn now to recognize the signs, as you learn to recognize what kids will say, is to distinguish a little bit and how to rate what your warning, what your radar is going to do. That there is a very different meaning to active and to passive thoughts.
Oh, you want to go back?
And there's all sorts of things. And I will tell you now, as adults, we've all done this, okay? We've all had times of despair. I know all my friends at some point have said, just shoot me now, give me that pill. We joke. We have to be very careful. Please do not joke like that, okay? It's done as a way of reducing tension, but our words are heard. Kids will hear, oh, my mom can joke about that. Well, then so can I. So we all have to be mindful about that. Those easy off-the-cuff remarks. But there are other, I wish I could just disappear, I'm worthless. Okay? And again, describing again the stories about things that they do. So obviously this is a very subtle, slow process. And you'll see signs. And I think the best part as parents, we're observers of our children. Most parents have an inner sense, an inner radar of something is up. All right? And I will tell you now, the second thing I tell you after resilience is trust that instinct, okay? You know your child the best. And if you think something is up, something's up. Lack of interest, isolating, withdrawal, agitation, irritability, crying spells, disrupted sleep, school avoidance, difficulty concentrating, giving away possessions. I'm going to just stop, do a quick one because the rest of the panel will really address this one, but getting help. And I'm going to end the talk really with saying that it takes a village to raise a child, which is why we're all here tonight, where our lives are all affected by this, and we can all play a part. We'll all have the times when people have said, you don't tell anybody. Please don't ever promise. You just say, I can't promise that. And sometimes they'll insist, and sometimes I get told as a physician, please don't tell, and I say, I'm not sure I can promise you that. I would like you to tell me, but I'm not sure I can promise you that. I can often say I'm legally bound if a student is suicidal or that I have to say something, but don't promise. Be vigilant. Again, we talked about talking to us, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. And I think that part of what to do is say, okay, I will give you some time, I will give you some space, but I'll come back. How about tomorrow, 5 o'clock? I mean, I think that's also part. I would say we all blow off our kids. We all are busy. We want to make sure that we have a set time to make sure we go back. Working on communication skills, I'll give you a little bit on that. Working on listening skills. And the one point I want to put out is like getting in touch with our own feelings and our own ways we send our own signals. We all send signals, whether they be verbal or nonverbal, and I think it's important to recognize that our stress is being watched by our children, and I think that we have to know that they're watching us. We're teaching them. They're patterning their behavior back from us, and I think it's important that we get our own touch with how we're feeling. And if we need help, then we need help. Okay, here, again, I'm just repeating the same things about making sure that you want to listen, that you want to stop. I'm going to sit down here. Kids will often say to me when they jokingly say, I want to kill myself, and parents' first reaction unbearably is, don't say that. Okay, so I think that if you hear that, the kids say, well, why can't I say that? Can I not tell my parents I'm upset? So be careful. It's shocking for parents to hear from their child. So I think you have to have some set reaction like, oh, I think I need to process that. I can't do it now because I'm driving down 95, but I need to come back to that because that's a pretty powerful statement. Again, using I statements, again, we say it all the time, but now you can't say that. You can't be depressed. How can you be depressed? You're president of the ski club. Being gentle, persistent, keep coming back. I'm fine, I'm fine. How many times have our children said I'm fine and they're really not? Listen without lecturing, and then validating feelings. Filling up nonverbal cues, and then I would just repeat again about making sure that you go back and saying, I don't need help, I'm fine. Then you can say, I need help, the family needs help. All right, and I'm going to stop and turn it over to my fellow panelists.
Can everybody hear me? All right. My big challenge is always getting the microphone right, so I've done my first task for the evening. I wanted to thank you again, and I am Dorothy Lowry from the school district, and I do a lot of the crisis work for the school district. And when I was preparing tonight, I was thinking, or preparing to what I was going to say tonight, I was thinking that many of you would probably come wanting to hear from the experts in the community other than school people, thinking that you talk to a lot of us all the time or feel you have access to all of us. And I was trying to think of what I could share that would really be different or something that you could not easily learn anywhere else. And I realized that I have this sort of the unique perspective because I talk to all the kids at the school district who are in crisis. And I've been talking to those students for the last 20 years. So I'm with them on some of their most difficult days, and I never stop being inspired by their strength and their ability to work through some of those difficult days. But I've heard their stories, and I know a lot of what they're dealing with. And so I decided to speak for them and share some of the trends, some of the things they're going to. And just to follow through with what the Tripathi family has brought out, the suicide and the consideration of suicide is a very real thing. It's going on in our school community and our adolescent community a lot more than it has been in the past. I probably do 3 or 4 suicide assessments every week, and so are some of my colleagues. I talk to the guidance counselors, the social workers, the psychologists, all of my colleagues, and a lot of them are doing a lot of that work. So it's very much in the community that kids are dealing with this as part of their lives or worried about friends who might be considering suicide. In terms of some of the trends that I've seen over the years, I told you that was going to be my big challenge, but in terms of some of the trends that I've seen over the years, one of the things I've noticed in the past 10 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, and this is consistent with what you were saying, Dr. Hillman, the increased number of kids reporting anxiety, a lot of discussion of anxiety. Before, about 20 years ago, they would have identified depression as being one of the issues that they were dealing with, and depression continues certainly to be one of the major mental health issues that we hear about. But an increased number of kids are saying that they are anxious, and they know what they mean by anxious. They sometimes say that they have social anxiety. A lot of times they also report with regard to demands on their lives that they're feeling overwhelmed, unable to cope. They're trying so hard to be perfect. They're trying so hard to do things on their own without asking for help. There's a lot of that going on that kids are struggling with. I think also they're absorbing pressures from the adults around them. During the past 3 or 4 years, I think some of the financial security that existed in this community has changed. There's more parents who have lost jobs. Kids are struggling with that. They're worried for their parents. They feel the worry of the adult community. So I think it's a very real issue that they feel just a sense of responsibility on their shoulders at times to do well in school so they can get in college or whatever else that they're working towards. So there's a lot more recognition of kids with stress and anxiety. For some of the kids, the anxiety is within the normal range, and they can cope with it. They keep their perspective, or they laugh, or they support each other. And teenagers are always great at laughing, which is why it's wonderful to spend time with them. But for some of the other kids, it's a much heavier burden to bear. They can't get away from their anxiety, and they really struggle with it. Sometimes their anxiety is also related to their depression. Sometimes it's related to ADHD or some other things that make it hard for them or to learn in the school community. There's a lot of sort of secondary anxiety that they're experiencing in relation to all the things they would like to be. So we're seeing a lot more of that. Some of the kids, I think, get into catastrophizing things. They think if I don't do this, if I don't do well on this test, or if I don't have this relationship work out, my life is over. They really don't have that perspective, healthy perspective, that resiliency trait of being able to reframe that and see it in a healthier way. So a lot of kids are struggling with that, with the need, I think, to learn to step back and say, this isn't the end of the world if this happens. But we're certainly seeing that as a theme, that kids are thinking that each thing is too important or more important than it should be, or defines their life. I think, too, we have an increased incident of kids coping with trauma and an increased sense of vulnerability. In the past year or two, there have been probably 4 recent alumni of Radnor High School who have died suddenly and tragically, as the Tripathi have talked about their family member, Sunil. And there's also been some adults in the community who have died suddenly and tragically. I think altogether some of the things I know about, it's been maybe 10 different families. And it's not unusual when I'm talking with the student who I'm doing an assessment with or who's depressed or suicidal that student will know one of those families or they'll know about that. Sometimes they know 2 of them. And so kids are being impacted by that because they care. And that's a good thing. Recently, I was talking with some kids who were kind of working through one of the recent tragedies, some of the older kids in the high school, and we were having a really good discussion. And one of the kids were all talking about how to help and how tragic this was, and one of the kids in the group said, at least in this community, people care that this happened. He was talking about one of his life experiences where he lived in a community where people didn't care or even notice that it was different that somebody had died tragically. So the kids care, but they're sensitive about that. They're feeling more vulnerable because of it, and sometimes they're traumatized by the loss. They may have been close to that person. So it's just something to be aware of in terms of what they're going through. And going back to the issue of mental health, the way kids talk about mental health needs, they're much more likely to use the language of suicide when they're asking for help or when they're communicating that they're feeling desperate. Suicide is often brought into their language, and they'll say it to a friend, or a friend will come seeking help for one of their friends, saying, I'm worried about Bob, I think he's suicidal. They make the comments, and I think it's become a way to talk and communicate their needs. Most of the time when we assess it, it is not, thankfully, a suicidal child. It's a child, trying to say, I'm really feeling out of control, I don't know what to do, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And we can get to a better place of where to start, or how to help with that, how to help problem solve. So again, thankfully it's not so, but I think more and more kids are using that language to ask for help, and it's something to be aware of. As Dr. Hillman was saying, to listen for any cues and to take them all seriously, as the Tripathi family was saying. The other thing that we're seeing in the schools, too, is an increased incident of cutting, self-harm, burning behavior. The kids, again, and that's a complicated issue about why kids are choosing to do that, but it's definitely something that is increased in the last few years, that kids are doing that, and they're often struggling. We see more probably at the younger ages. Kids are struggling to feel good about themselves, to find their voice, to let someone know in some way that they're hurting, and that's coming out through some of those behaviors. And that's a complicated thing, but it's again another thing to be aware of. Again, a good percentage of those kids are not suicidal, but they are dealing often with depression, anxiety, and some other issues. And of course, we do continue to see a lot of kids dealing with depression, and that's something that we're always trying to help with and very aware of in the school community, I would say. And it continues to be a difficult situation to cope with. One of the things, too, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the trends regarding resiliency that I've seen in the community of students I work with. And I always I have to say, I never cease to be inspired by the students at Radnor. They are really wonderful people to talk with. And sometimes if I have difficult days from all the work I do, just spending time with some of the kids, they will always say something that is inspiring or renewing in terms of their perspective. One of the things I've seen, as I said, a lot of the kids who are perhaps junior, seniors, and a little bit out of high school even at this point, have witnessed and have gone through a number of student suicides or suicides in the community. And so they have actually developed, a lot of them who have coped with it in a healthier way, some level of resiliency. They can have a perspective. They've learned to kind of work through and come to terms with how they see the decision to commit suicide, how they see the loss of someone, how they might cope, and they have some very interesting discussions with each other. And they also have I think, been very aware of how to support each other. We get a lot more kids bringing other students down to the guidance area to ask for help. I'm worried about my friend. They are much more open, which again is a great strength, because we want kids to be open. We want them to come and ask for help. So we see they're much more there for each other and bringing other kids for help, which is great. One of the things, again, in terms of the inspiring comments, so many students recently that I was talking to at the juniors and seniors in the past month when there was another tragedy in the community, so many of those kids talked about how when something like that happens, it just changes their worldview. They realize that all the things they were worrying about were not that important, and they go back to what is important. They talk about their family, their friends. Some of the kids will say, well, it wasn't important that what I got in that test. It wasn't important where I'm going to college. This is what matters, just being here with each other. So they're learning from it. I wish they were not learning from these situations, certainly, but they have shown the capacity to learn and to be resilient. And I think some of these kids have been able to open up and grow and be stronger through this experience. Again, I would not want them ever to have to go through it in that way, but I think that's the strength, and they are supporting each other. Now, one of the things I was asked to talk a little bit about are the school resources and what's there. Some of you may know about student assistance teams and student assistance programs, but they are programs throughout all the schools in Pennsylvania, public schools, that were mandated, I think, back by 1992. There are teams in each middle school and high school around, and in other parts of the country too, but certainly in Pennsylvania, that are trained to identify students at risk. They began as an initiative in their early phases to identify students at risk for drug and alcohol and depression, suicide. But they've evolved over the years to identify students at risk not only for depression, suicide, and drug and alcohol, but for other behavioral issues, for attendance issues, health issues, for a variety of issues that would make them vulnerable. Student assistance was really an initiative. Again, we have teams. I should go back to that. We have teams at both the high school and middle school. The high school, it's called HS Hope, and the middle school is MS Hope. And that information is actually on the district website if you want to look up that information. But that's always a point of where you can refer students in both the middle school and the high school community here. If you need help. The people who sit on that team are some building administrators are on the team. The guidance counselors are on the teams, the school nurses on the teams, social workers, psychologists, and often teachers are on the team who have good student rapport. So they are certainly a point of if you are worried, and we have parents call and ask for help there because they know they can get an assessment or they can get support. So those are in all schools, and they are functioning, and they are trained to identify kids at risk. The whole point of student assistance was actually to build a bridge between the school community and the parent community or the larger community, because in the school community we see kids in their social world, we see them compared to other kids and get a sense of what maybe is different or out of the range of what their friends are doing. So we kind of see things, and schools began to then let parents know more. I think partly what we're going to be talking about here is for everyone to share information more, to share between school and friends and school and family, you know, to kind of everybody to work together. That's what student assistance is all about. So that is certainly a place that you can always call, and certainly guidance counselor or building administrator would be a point of contact if you're ever worried about your child. You can invite the school for help. So that's a resource, and that's what student assistance teams are working on. They actually do trainings. If the student assistance becomes involved with the child in the school, they can do assessment work. Often there may be also a social work referral where the social workers can help the family. There's a variety of things that they do. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about support groups too and things like that are offered in the school. At the middle school, there's also a mentoring program that for kids who are struggling, maybe feeling isolated or not connected, there's a mentoring program where adults are paired with a child and try to support them. We try to also have that for new students coming in at times, so that if they feel less alone or unconnected, they have an adult mentor, someone to kind of be there for them. So that's another support that's in place. One of the other initiatives going on in the school, which I think is tied to mental health, is the Karen Foundation, which is a drug and alcohol facility in the area. And actually, it's a nationwide facility, but they have a lot of presence in this area. For the past 6 years, we have somebody from the Karen Foundation working in the middle school and high school. Actually, she's here 4 days a week at this point and running groups both at the middle school and the high school. And some of the students, we've actually seen a whole class graduate that she's actually worked with over the years. And so we're starting to build in, it's really a way to work on prevention, because in part that's what we're all here to do, to be there more and to start working with kids at an earlier age who might be struggling with something. And I think, obviously, the Karen Foundation does a lot of work with drug and alcohol, but there's such a link between drug and alcohol and depression, anxiety, and a lot of other mental health factors. It's really, for most adolescents, when we do assessments, I'd say the majority, it is really a co-occurring disorder. There's usually another issue paired with the drug and alcohol abuse that is going on. A lot of the kids are depressed, anxious, have a lot of other issues, the kids who are start drinking or abusing drugs. So that's really an initiative to try to get earlier to some of those kids, because people can see the outward behavior of drinking or getting high and think that they're just having fun or whatever that it means to the child. But a lot of those kids are actually struggling with significant depression, and they're trying to make it go away. So that is one of the ways that we're trying to get more preventative support in there earlier. The kinds of groups that are being offered in the school community regarding this, one is there's several resiliency groups running to teach kids resiliency skills that Dr. Hillman talked about. And there's the resiliency that the Karen Foundation group does as well is to address sometimes if there's a sibling or another adult member in their family a child is growing up with who is a alcoholic or an addict. We have kids in the middle school who sometimes have an older sibling or a parent who is had a history of addiction or alcoholism, and some of those kids participate in the group to support them so that they will have some other skills along the way to cope with some of the struggles that they have, and more awareness not to use the same path as somebody else in their family, and to understand more about addiction. So there's lots of promotion of resiliency, and I think that's sort of something that schools need to go towards. Life skills groups are to teach kids other coping skills. In terms of, instead of using drugs and alcohol, they teach them, for example, a lot of kids are anxious when they're first at the high school, going to some of the parties, how are they going to handle that? They do a lot of work with helping kids feel more comfortable, how they can handle it without getting totally drunk or high, and teaching them other ways to cope with a lot of the stress. So it's kind of all paired in with the stress thing that we've been talking about too. So that's other kind of groups that are being offered. Recovery groups are for kids who have gone through addiction treatment, maybe coming out of a rehab center. There's a recovery groups for students who are in recovery, and it's a very hard path for a kid to walking back into a high school anywhere in the country, having to be sober or straight. It's a very difficult path for some of those kids. And so there is support through the Karen Foundation in Radnor in recent years for the kids coming back. Nadine Carroll and I actually run grief and loss groups for kids who've had someone die in their family. They're offered at both the high school and middle school every year. And that is a support because, kids have experienced death for a variety of reasons in their family, and it's another support for them. Anger management groups are offered as well by Nadine Carroll, and changing families, where families are divorcing or reorganizing in some way. So that's a little bit. One more thing that is available in the schools too is if a student is identified with a mental health problem such as depression, or perhaps anxiety disorder, they can be, or bipolar disorder, they could be given an IEP, an individual educational plan, and whole supports put into their day in the school community. But that's by case, so I won't get into all the details of that. So there's a fair amount of response. But if you're trying to ask for help, you certainly could go through the student assistance teams in schools and be aware of that, or ask an administrator or the guidance counselor is always a point of entry, because there's really a lot of awareness in the schools at this point, whether we want it to be that way or not, about all that's going on, but to try to support and keep kids safe. So, and I think.
Thank you. My name is David McKeegan, and I am the Executive Director for the Delaware County Medical Society. I'm also a co-founder of the Delaware County Suicide Prevention Task Force. I'm a co-chair of the Delaware County Child Death Review Team, a member of the Pennsylvania Youth Suicide Initiative Executive Committee, and a member of the Delaware County Health Advisory Board. So my work is all really about both physical health and behavioral health, as we now call it. I want to start by saying how wonderful it is to be here in the village of Radnor. And you all are special for coming together and doing this. It's our hope that we'll be able to do this throughout Delaware County as often as possible to highlight a lot of important things that have already been said and are going to be said. I'd also apologize if it appears as though I'm reading from my notes, but some of what I want to say is very carefully worded, and I want to make sure I don't mess it up and that I'm understood. First, I want to tell you a little bit about our task force, because it is a very unique group. It has brought all kinds of folks from the behavioral health community, which we used to call mental health, but now behavioral health is the correct way to say that. In 2002, we began this work as a combination of work through the Delaware County Medical Examiner's Office. Yes, here in Delaware County, we have a medical examiner, a board-certified forensic pathologist named Dr. Rick Hellman. Dr. Hellman, I know very well. He sees himself as a public health doctor. The other folks involved in our inception of a task force was another group called SOS, or the Survivors of Suicide. You'll hear me refer to survivors. And in many ways, we are all survivors, as many of you have said already. We know someone, we've lost someone. Typically, though, we see survivors as direct family members who've lost a loved one through a completed suicide. The task force has come a long way since those times in 2002. Just last year, they incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit. So it tells you that, unfortunately, our work is here to stay. We believe very, very strongly in it and are always looking for more people. One of our volunteers is one of your social workers, Kristen, from Radnor High School, and we are very pleased to have social workers and counselors and teachers and administrators and law enforcement people and clergy and all kinds of people coming together on a regular basis to talk about suicide here in Delaware County. That's remarkable. 10 or 12 years ago, it was hard just to get a teacher or a principal to acknowledge that there might be something else we could do. So we are making a little progress. As I said, the task force is comprised of all volunteers, And it was founded on a premise that suicide is an important and a preventable public health dilemma. Many of our task force members are also involved at the state or national level in suicide prevention. So we have good connections, and we get to learn who's doing what and what may work in different communities. We hope to increase awareness of suicide and decrease the stigma. Somebody over here used the word stigma early on, and that's a really, really important message. And I'll give you a challenge where you can start together on that. But let's stop talking about people who commit suicide, because that sounds like something that's law enforcement oriented. And let's talk about the people who complete a suicide. It's just a gentler and kinder term, and it'll mean a lot to a lot of people. So you'll hear me say completing a suicide instead of committing. We also want to dispel some myths. One of the hardest things to do to get the ball rolling sometimes is to get people to talk about suicide and to talk one-on-one with people who are at risk. We used to think that, oh, we're going to put it in their mind or we're going to give them the idea, and folks, that's not so. Believe me. If you're talking to them about it, they probably already thought about it or know someone that has, so you cannot do any harm by talking about it. It's important. Please engage people. Our big message is one that I call parity. That feeling depressed is not uncommon and should not be ignored. And there are many great ways to get help. Yes, therapy is a good way, group therapy, individual therapy, peer therapy, medications. It's going to take something different probably for every different patient. But parity means that we see mental health or behavioral health on the same playing field as we see physical health. If you're a depressed person or suffering from bipolar disease, the chances are great that you'll be discriminated against in some way, shape, or form. People just don't think you're as good. But if I have a broken arm or the flu or pneumonia, there's nobody out there with attitude about me. So let's change how we think. Let's change how we raise our kids and help them to understand that behavioral health is on a level playing field. Maybe someday I'll be able to convince the insurance companies too. We'll see. We certainly work on that. The task force coordinates and presents training programs for doctors. We offer 2 CME programs a year. They're well attended by Delaware County doctors. Most of the time we have to go out to the hospital where they're already meeting because it's hard to get people to come to meetings these days. But we also focus on others, nurses, law enforcement, other first responders, clergy, and all kinds of other professional people. This past November, the Suicide Task Force held its 9th annual conference at the Springfield Country Club. And we had almost 300 people there for a full day to talk about suicide prevention. So we're very proud of that. We also have what we call a suicide review team, which is a multidisciplinary team that meets and reviews the medical examiner's records in the case of every completed suicide in Delaware County. We're certainly not trying to find blame or even say what if, as much as really understand the circumstances so that then later when we're talking to groups, we know a little bit more about what we're saying. We have a lot of really good handouts for you this evening that are outside on the tables that are from the task force. There's also a map. The map that you'll see tonight demonstrates suicides that were completed in Delaware County or by Delaware County residents in the past 2 years only. There's another map that has 5 years worth before it and another map, unfortunately, before that. And we're going to keep mapping this to show that it's not just a problem here or there, that suicide has tremendous impact on every part of the community. If you see a township or a borough on our map out there that has no pins in it, don't worry, the previous ones will or have pins, and the future ones also will. There really is no safe place to live. It's all a matter of resources and how you connect with them. Connecting with resources is the hardest problem. The Tripathi family demonstrated that to you. They knew that their son and brother was at risk, but getting him to accept the fact that his risk put him in a dangerous position is often a very difficult thing to do. And when you ask, what else can you do? That's the question every survivor asks. What can we do? We obviously need to keep trying, and to try in as many positive and upbeat and caring and loving ways as possible. This list of roadblocks is terrific. You'll turn people off more often than you'll turn them on. But if you can engage and you can say to people, I'm very concerned about you, and we need to find some resources that will help, and you should be a part of helping to find, then you may be successful. I can't sit here and say that you're going to be successful, but you may. We have some resources that we'd like to share with you through the Delaware County Suicide Prevention's website. You can Google us at just Delaware County Suicide Prevention, and it'll come up. And we've worked very carefully to develop this website with articles for families and professionals and all kinds of people in professional settings, as well as Joe Lunchbox at the Veterans Center afterwards having a beer with his buddies. Those people need to know, too, that depression is common and that it's okay to ask for help. Our task force is also interested in advocacy. How can we help shape the future and promote laws that may help and rules? I'm very pleased to tell you that the state task force that I work on has just had a bill that's passed through the Pennsylvania Senate. It's on to the House, and it will, sorry school districts, but it will require all school districts to have a suicide prevention plan, and that will include training for all the staff, the teachers, the counselors, the janitors, the cafeteria workers. We all need to sensitize ourselves to these things and be willing to help people who need to get help. Following the high-profile suicides by train several years ago in Delaware County, I'm sure some of you may remember hearing about this down in the more eastern part of Delaware County. Our task force worked with a number of stakeholders in the county on a post-vention plan to really orchestrate a proper response for the community. And then we got a chance to take on the media. And as I told the editor of the Delaware County Daily Times many times, news medias that sensationalize things like suicide are doing an injustice to their readers. And when you carry something on for weeks and weeks and weeks and talk about death on the tracks, it's irresponsible journalism, and you should be called on the carpet. Our awareness programs are ongoing, and we're always looking for help. We'd like to have more people talking about this and not being ashamed. We host a 5K run walk every May at the Ridley Creek State Park down in Media. Our task force has its bi-monthly steering committee meetings where we'll bring in speakers that are very interesting. Unfortunately, a lot of this is done during the day, and folks who have other responsibilities during the day and students who have to be in class can't always attend. So we are looking for other ways to involve people that can't make it during the 9 to 5 school day. We have a newsletter and a lot of room for involvement for anybody that's interested. So I am going to be very interested in the questions that you folks may have, and at this time, turn it over to Jen.
Good evening, everyone. I feel too tall for this microphone. It's all good. It's on YouTube. I'll cue you. So I want to just thank Alice Lair and the members of Ask and Reach for having me here tonight. I'm really not as cool as the rest of these panelists, I have to tell you right off the bat. I am not a doctor and a head of a task force, and I really have the utmost respect for everyone here and what you've shared. It's so important, and this issue is so heavy. I can feel it kind of on my chest right now. I'm here to talk a little bit about preventative strategies, something called mindfulness, that can have protective benefits physically in the brain against stress. And I have this wonderful opportunity to work with a cohort of individuals at Radnor Middle School right now. It's made up of teachers, a parent who's actually here tonight, also, staff from all over the building who have come together who said, what can we do to help teach our kids social emotional learning? What can we do to help teach our kids what stress is and how to manage it, right? So through a generous grant from the Radnor Educational Foundation, I'm running a year-long initiative at Radnor Middle School, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about that. But before I do it, I just wanted to see a show of hands. How many people have heard the word mindfulness before? Okay, wow. You see, that makes my heart sing, because the longer I do this work, the more hands that are raised, and it's wonderful. So just to give you a simple definition, mindfulness is about awareness. It's about noticing what's happening inside and outside your body and mind with kindness and curiosity. So I'm going to just lead us through a 30-second mindfulness activity for those of you who have never done it before, and it's going to be super fun, so get excited, okay? Everybody put your 2 feet flat on the floor. Now press your feet into the ground as if you're going to stand. Just try and push your feet down into the ground and notice what's happening in your legs. See if you can push down a little harder. What's happening in your legs? Tightness? They hurt, right? People are like, I'm thinking I have to go to the gym. Exactly. Okay, you can stop. When we direct our attention into the sensing mode, we don't have this left brain thinking mode competing at the same time. And anxiety is this mode that we get into where we ruminate on a little chain of thoughts. And how I tell students about this is I say, your thoughts are kind of like these little roller coasters, and they go around in circles, right? Sometimes we activate this same chain of thoughts again and again and again, and it just keeps going round and round. So for the kids with social anxiety, it goes something like this. When I go to the dance, everyone's going to be looking at me. I'm going to be wearing the wrong shoes. I'm a bad person. I'm the worst. I can't do this. No one likes me. And it goes round and round and round and round. All of us have our own little chains of inner critic that goes around in our left brains as well. And the good thing is, mindfulness teaches us how to notice those thoughts without having to be them, okay? So mindfulness is a set of strategies that I teach to students and I teach to teachers to help decrease and manage stress levels, okay? So take a moment and think about, in your mind, 5 things that are stressful. Just 5, okay? Whisper that to the person next to you, 5 things that are stressful. Okay, so we had at least 3. I only said 5. I know there's a lot. I mean, my buddy over here said Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So, so things that are stressful, we have plenty. We have a laundry list, right? So can I just hear one person from the end of each row just tell me one thing they mentioned they feel comfortable sharing? What's one thing that's stressful for you, sir? Work. Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Work. Okay?
College essays.
College essays. Good.
Kids stress.
Kids stress. Yeah. Go ahead in the back.
For me?
Yeah.
Kids stress.
Kids stress. That's what's on all of our minds right now. Yep. Go ahead. In the white. Go ahead. Yeah.
Dealing with my son.
Your son. Yep. Transitions are stressful. Snowstorms, electricity, not having it, yes, very stressful. A children's illness, yes. Judy? Grief, absolutely. So we have plenty of things that we know are stressful. How many of you can define what stress is? If I asked you, what is stress? If you go out on the street and ask people, what is stress? It is very difficult for people to tell you what it actually is. And I think that we're really doing kids a disservice because we're not telling them what is happening for them. We're not telling them what anxiety is. We're not telling them how thoughts, emotions, and sensations in our body work together to cause this huge ball of stress, right? So the things that are stressful about work, it's like is work stressful, or is me thinking about going to work tomorrow causing me stress, right? It could just be a thought that's causing the stress. And the stress is actually a physiological response that happens in your brain, right? We've all heard of this fight or flight response once before, but we're not teaching kids anything about how this works. We're not teaching kids that they have this amygdala in the back of their brain, and it's like their watchdog, and it's constantly activated, all right? And the thing about the teen brain is that it looks for novelty. Teenagers are looking for novelty. When they say they're bored, they really are bored because their brains are seeking pleasure. It's just the nature of their development that this front area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex hasn't fully developed yet. And this is where, guess what? We have impulse control. We have things like proper decision making. We weigh pros and cons when we're making, this is all our higher order thinking, right? And this is still in development way into their 20s. And my background is in education. I spent my entire career teaching reading, teaching special education, kids in elementary school, middle and high school. And I will tell you that students flocked to me because they wanted to tell me what was wrong with them. They wanted to tell me why they were so upset, why they were anxious. What am I going to do about this? How about my mom that's really sick? No matter where I was, in Philadelphia, in Center City with kids in foster care, or out here at a private school on the main line, every child has the same response to stress. All of the things that Dr. Hillman mentioned, the somatic complaints, fatigue, headache, abdominal pain, and trouble sleeping, all effects of the stress response. All effects of having that cortisol and adrenaline running through their body at a rapid fire all the time. And when we teach kids about this, then they have some agency. We're giving them some tools and saying, hey, guess what? This is what's happening in your brain right now. And you can notice this and do some things to help you calm it down. So just how I got here was that, like I said, I spent my entire career as an educator, and sitting there thinking in front of the classroom as all of these mandates come down as what we need to be teaching and the additional curricula and additional standards and the testing, we all know it all too well. I sat in front of these kids and they weren't ready for learning. They weren't available for learning because their attention was up in their minds. Their attention was worried about, you wouldn't believe some of the things that kids are thinking about, let me tell you. I've had kids who are thinking about what they're going to wear for Halloween instead of thinking about the math lesson I'm teaching in 4th grade. I have kids in Center City who, when I'm trying to teach them about how to read, since they're on a 4th grade reading level, they're too busy worried about where they're going to sleep that night to be taking in this information. The students who I work with privately out on the main line are really stressed about college and about SATs and about grades. And all of those stresses, even though they're all different, even though you're stressed about work and you're stressed about your son, all of those stresses result in the same thing. The stress response is activated in our brain. It causes a chemical reaction that sets off in our body, and we have certain symptoms that fall out of that, including fatigue, headaches, abdominal pain, and trouble sleeping. And a lot of times, we don't even have to be in the event, like work. We don't have to be at work to be stressed about it. We're just thinking about work, and it makes us stressed about it. Anybody have this going on? Thinking about work makes you stressed about it? Absolutely. So, sorry, I get really excited about this stuff. So, Roots and Wings is my business that I started about a year ago because I said, this is crazy. I am not being effective placing myself in one school. I will not stop until I can go across schools and train people to understand how stress works, what we can do about it, how we can use mindfulness strategies to help us notice how we get on those negative, my kids call it the negative thought train, right? We kind of jump on this negative thought train sometimes and we end up down the rabbit hole. And I teach kids how to notice when that first thought comes to say, okay, I see I'm about to go down that spiral. I can direct my attention to something else, something neutral. I can notice my breath in my body. I can notice my feet on the floor, right? I can check myself throughout the day to say, am I holding my shoulders up like this, right? Everybody check your shoulders. Are they in your ears right now, right? Because this is what happens when we get stressed. We go like this. And that's not an accident. We do that because back in the day when tigers were chasing us, we had to protect all of our internal organs. So we hunch and walk around like this because we're super stressed and we're protecting all of our innards, okay? When you tell kids that, it's really empowering because they have no idea. They don't know what's happening when they're stressed. They don't know that anxiety is normal. They don't know that they can do some things to help calm them down and say, you know what, I see I have those thoughts, and I have this tendency to go into this negative thought pattern, or I have these what's called cognitive distortions. I think I heard one of my colleagues mention how teenagers have these thoughts that aren't necessarily true, like they catastrophize. Well, if we teach them the common cognitive distortions, like black and white thinking, it's those thoughts that's like, I'm driving to work and I'm going to be late. I'm always late, right? That's black and white thinking. It's a common cognitive distortion. If we can teach kids what that means and what that is, they can recognize it and be like, oh, I just had a cognitive distortion. I don't have to go with that, right? I don't have to follow that train down into this place where I feel my shoulders in my ears and I feel stomach ache and I feel super stressed out. So, mindfulness is about being aware of ourselves and being aware of our own stress and how that stress can have an effect on other people around us, all right? So, right now, I have a wonderful cohort of individuals at the middle school who are interested in doing this proactive work to help our students in this community to learn these tools now, to learn how to notice where their attention is, to notice when their attention is wandering, out of a lesson and into their thinking, to notice when they're feeling anxiety and how anxiety registers in your body, right? A lot of us weren't taught this in school. And so it's really my mission to make mindfulness accessible to schools and to kids and to teachers. And I will not stop until I see all of the hands raised when I come to do these presentations of what is mindfulness and how do you use it. So I just want to mention one other thing that there was a recent study that came out that found that teachers who had a mindfulness course, actually it acted as a protective effect against teacher burnout. Okay? So think about the effects as a parent, right? We know teacher burnout is a very serious thing. And that's when teachers get so stressed out that they quit their jobs and leave the profession within 5 years. So mindfulness has this ability to build in this system where we can protect ourselves against burning out or against going down that rabbit hole and going down into that negative stress circuit. I'm not going to say a lot about the research right now, but I would love to talk more with anyone who is interested about hearing more about mindfulness and about what's going on at the middle school. And I really do hope that we have an opportunity to give our kids some tools to start working towards helping themselves. And I just wanted to end with a short video clip of some students. There's 3 students in this clip. They have a range in ages. The first one is a middle school student, not from Radnor. Second one is a first-year college student, and the third one is an 8-year-old. So I just wanted to share a couple comments from the students because I think it's just better coming from them than me, I think. It's on the YouTube. Oh. So just go to the E, I think, and then just hit play.
So mindfulness is the ability to focus on what's going on in the moment and to kind of direct your thoughts about what's happening at that exact time. And I think it's helped me in just kind of calming down before, just calming down my thoughts before I need to focus on something.
Okay, so I think that mindfulness is being able to recognize sensations in your body with respect for your thoughts as well. When they come, just recognizing them and being able to let them go. So then you're able to be fully aware of yourself. As far as the way that it helps me, personally, I've just been able to recognize when my body is feeling certain emotions and being able to harness it in a certain way so then it's easier for me to react properly.
Hi, my name is Dean. I am 8 years old and I go to Benchmark. And when I fight with my sister, she really gets me angry, and instead of fighting back, I use mindfulness to help me not to hurt her, and that's how I do it.
So what do you do to use your mindfulness?
I take deep breaths. I use my bottle, the ball, and my slinky.
Okay. And how does that help you?
That helps me get my frustrated thoughts out of my body.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
I just want to thank all of our panelists tonight. They were wonderful. So we have some time for question and answers. Please, if you write down the question, direct it if somebody specifically wants to answer it. Otherwise, we'll just open it up to the panel. I'll give you guys a minute or two to write them down.